All right. Okay. This is going to seem super weird. You ready? Hi, my name is Jack, and today we're going to be having a casual conversation about the experience of aging. The purpose of this session will be to find out what your life is currently like and how it's changed over time, physically and emotionally. I want you to feel comfortable discussing anything that comes to mind openly and honestly, because you're not going to say anything that I can't handle. I'm going to be recording, but it's only to help me remember things, because my notes are not as always perfect as I want them to be.
Okay.
We're going to aim for about an hour. If at any point you feel like you need a break, don't hesitate to ask. Are there any questions that you have before we get started?
No.
Okay, cool. I think a good place to begin might be introducing yourself. And,
Sure. My name is Burt Dallas. My nickname when I was a kid was LB, which stood for Little Burt, and I'm 70 years old. Born in March 13th, 1949. And I don't know how much of an introduction you want. I've done a lot of different things.
Sure.
In my life.
That's fine.
So rather than just rambling, let's go with...
When you say a lot of different things, are you talking about work?
Work professionally.
Yeah. Take me on a tour.
I guess I started in high school.
Yeah.
Working as a locksmith.
Uh-huh.
My father was a locksmith. I worked in his business. And then I went off to college for a couple of years and studied business administration and economics and at the University of Florida, and decided that that wasn't bad, but it's not where I wanted to be right then. That was 1970. So I left there and went to New York. My family had been living in Puerto Rico. I grew up, to backtrack a little bit, I grew up in a lot of different places since my father was in the Army, and went to about 9 different schools, maybe 10 different schools, before graduating high school. Places like Miami, where I was born, Atlanta, South Carolina, Alabama, then overseas to Taiwan, and then to San Antonio, Texas, and then to San Juan, Puerto Rico, and then to the 12th grade in Gainesville, Florida, where I also lived for the 2 years that I was in college there. So I couldn't quite figure what I wanted to do with my life. So I went to New York, where my sister and I had a friend who was going to Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, and my sister had already moved there.
Yeah.
So I went up there. She offered me to stay with her. She had a 1-bedroom apartment, or one large room apartment, and I stayed with her. I slept in the corner, and I found a job with Merrill Lynch, which was a big, in fact, the biggest brokerage at the time. And just being a clerk.
Yeah. Just what?
Being a clerk.
Clerk, yeah.
In a midtown brokerage house.
What?
And,
What were the responsibilities of the clerk?
I basically handled the money as it comes in, however it came in, because at that point there was not much in the way of bank transfers, or there was no online transfers, so it came in in cash or checks. Open up the mail, get the checks, check the information, send that information out to the brokers, and make sure that it got in the right accounts. And if there was a margin call, I had to tell the broker that they had to contact their client to get more money from them. I had to watch that. Or if they were late, because they have so many days to get the check and to buy what they had bought. If they weren't transferring, they weren't buying and selling. If they were introducing new money into it, they had a given amount of time to do that. And then an interesting thing was the wire transfer was that it was all on basically a teletype that went from our office in Midtown, which was a Penn Station office, down to Wall Street, on Pine Street, where the headquarters was. And it was teletyped, and there was a teletype operator there, and we had a big sheet of all the money and all of the account numbers, and so we had to total everything up. So everything would be sent down there, and their way of checking it was that they totaled all the account numbers, and they totaled all of the amounts of money, and that the totals had to match. So that means that you basically added by hand, like long columns of numbers, and it had to be verified down at the home office. If it didn't add, they say something's wrong, and then you'd have to do it all over again.
Okay, So you're at Merrill Lynch. You're doing that. What else is your life like?
I was living first in an apartment that I gotten over the summer because there was a lot of student housing in that area. A lot of students living there. A lot of them away for the summer. So I lived in one of those places. Somebody was going to be back in the fall. And then when the fall came, a friend of my sister's neighbor came by. He was an NYU student. I was putting together a house in Park Slope, and asked if I wanted to have a room there, and I said sure. And so I moved into a place in Prospect Place, between 5th and 6th Avenue, and mostly students there. Some Hunter students, some NYU students, a couple of people, like 3 people, were young working people, worked in different offices. There was one guy who was setting up in his own newspaper, and how many were there? I guess there was 2, 5, 7, 8, 9 of us, I think. And I stayed there probably for about a year. And during that year, I hated the job at Merrill Lynch that I had.
You hated it. That's a really strong thing to say. Okay. So
didn't see myself going there. Everybody who was working there, I mean, I didn't like the business model they had. And I quit and got a taxi license, and I started out driving a taxi.
Yeah.
So I was driving a taxi, and I was going to art school.
This is what year?
That was probably, let's see, 70? Yeah, that was 70. 70 into 71.
Okay, yeah. So you were...
That was fall of 70. Yeah.
What drew you to Merrill Lynch in the first place?
I just went to the New York State Employment Commission.
Yeah.
And said, "Do you have any jobs?"
And they actually got you one.
Yeah, they actually got me one. They said, "Well, you've got 2 years of college, and you can do this stuff, and you can do." Merrill Lynch had put
Wow.
basically an ad there with the Employment Commission, and they said, "Okay,
Wow.
you qualify for that."
So before we continue, I wanna reiterate that one of the things we want to focus on
Yeah.
is sort of what your life was like emotionally as well as physically.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if we can talk in terms of physical activities, but also just your feelings in general about the things that you're doing. I think the details are really important, but something like saying that like you needed a job at Merrill Lynch because you got the job at Merrill Lynch because you needed a job and then you ended up hating it. I think that's like really good for the purpose of this interview.
Yeah, I mean, my parents didn't give me anything towards either college or towards my living expenses.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I worked during college.
Yeah.
Took out a small amount of loan. And basically I was a lost soul. I mean, I didn't know what I was doing, or what I had no shining ambition of what I wanted to do.
Okay.
So I was just kind of poking around.
Okay. So in 1970, you tried out Merrill Lynch, hated it, poking around, just thought, hey, why not drive a taxi?
Yeah.
What was that like?
Before that, I was started taking classes, evening classes, at the Art Students League in New York.
English classes? Like English literature?
No, art classes.
Art.
Sculpture.
Oh, sculpture. Okay,
sculpture, drawing, painting. Mostly sculpture and drawing.
Yeah. Great.
And that was while I was still working at Merrill Lynch. Kind of made me think even more. I didn't like working there.
Were you, was that a desk job? Were you very active?
It was a desk job.
Were you,
so I didn't move around.
What were you doing for hobbies?
Not much.
For fun?
Not much. Hang out, go to the movies.
Okay, yeah. Would you say you were pretty sedentary?
Okay. Yeah. I do a lot of walking around, looking at things, doing things. But aside from playing softball in the softball league, not a lot.
Okay.
I didn't have a bicycle. I didn't bicycle.
Okay, yeah, no bicycle. All right, so you're working this desk job, you're going to the movies, hanging out. You start driving a taxi. How did that address your hatred of your work?
Well, I didn't hate it anymore.
Okay.
I mean, it was something different, and it was kind of new and liberating. I mean, I basically worked when I wanted to. I basically walked from where I was living to a garage and got a car and went out and drove. I started out in the evening And some days they would mix it up. And, I really started to get around New York City then. Went all over the place.
What was the impetus for that decision to select that job?
Because it was, I could earn money enough to support myself.
Yeah.
In fact, I could do that working maybe 3 days a week since my expenses were low. So I could go all over the place. At that time, how it worked was that you split the fare, and the driver would get 49%. That percentage has been reduced.
Okay.
Since then, but it wasn't bad. He gets 49% in tips. And so I thought it was great. It didn't have any requirements of me beyond that I show up and that I did the work.
Yep.
And I got to go a lot of different places and see a lot of different things and hang out and see what people were doing.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. It was an exciting place. It was about 71 or 72.
What about it did you find particularly exciting? I know it gave you freedom. It sort of met your needs financially. It was not too big of a commitment. But what were the real upsides?
I got to talk to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'd tell somebody was like a cool person, and you could just talk to them.
Yeah.
Especially if, I was a real blabbermouth at that time. Sometimes, if I could engage somebody in talking about what they were doing, about some third-party subject. So I think I learned quite a bit about a lot of different people.
How did that sort of...
Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to get this wrapped up. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So at this time, it sounds like you were somewhat directionless. Thank you.
Yeah.
And you were pursuing...
Are you done?
I am finished, yes.
I think it's way better.
Thank you.
Well, I was looking at art school and doing more of that.
So you were doing you were doing like business administration, and then you stopped that and you started doing art school. What did your time as a taxi driver sort of? How did that? What was that like in the conversation of figuring out what you wanted to do?
What was it like?
How did it help me? Yeah.
So I thought it was cool. Yeah. And I liked, driving around in the cool parts of town, downtown, Soho, the Village, the West Village, the East Village, places like that, where there were cool people.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You have a nice day.
Okay, you too.
All right, a lot of cool people.
A lot of cool people. I like that. It was like, new and open and exciting.
Yeah.
So that was all to the good. And I'm saying, well, I like doing this art thing. So I could do some more of it. I was at that point then studying during the day.
Yeah.
And then around the end of that spring, most of the people in the house were leaving the house, going different places, and then my friend who had introduced me there, he was driving back to California. He was from Los Angeles.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And we had friends in San Francisco. And he says, well, you want to come out to San Francisco? Driving out there. And I said, yeah, okay. Sounds like fun.
Yeah.
Never been there. Heard a lot about it. Maybe it will be. And so I guess that was in the springtime. No, somehow we went through the summer because it was in the fall.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That, or late summer, early fall. We drove out there, and when we had gotten to Cleveland, we visited his grandmother, who was from Cleveland, stayed at her place, and his mother was coming from Los Angeles and was going to be flying to Europe, and talked him into flying along. So there I am in Cleveland. It's like, and he says, "Hey, sorry, buddy, but this is a good opportunity for me." I'm like,
come on. Yeah.
Says, all right, so let's figure out what am I going to do.
Yeah.
So I had previously met this other woman who was from Cleveland, and actually she was an old girlfriend of his who had come to New York. I met her there, and I got in touch with her and said, "Hey, can I stay with you for a little bit while I try to figure out what's going on?" She said, "Sure." So I stayed with her for a few days, and I went to Case Western Reserve and visited the Student Union Travel Board, which I don't know if is much now, but most colleges, universities would have a student union, and the student union and other places probably would have travel boards that would have a map, and people would put pin destinations on there. And if they're driving through there, they're driving to a destination, they would need riders if they wanted somebody to share the driving, share the expenses. And so I looked at it, didn't see anything, and I looked back, and there was somebody who was driving to San Francisco the day after I looked at it again.
Yeah.
So I called this person, and she was a woman who was going from Connecticut, had stopped there to visit a friend, and was continuing on to Berkeley. So I said, cool. Actually, Oakland, part of Oakland.
Yeah.
Sunnyside Heights.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, I'll be happy to, if you are going there, to share the expenses and share the driving. I'm a good driver, we can do that. And she said, okay. Just from a phone conversation.
Wow.
And so we drove almost straight through, just one stop in Cheyenne, Wyoming, to there. And when I got there, she was living in a house where there was 6 people, 7 people living in a house, and they had a spare room. That was actually more of like a public room in the basement. And they said, you can stay there if you want. So I said, okay, wow, great, thank you.
Yeah.
And then I went and visited the friends that I had intended to stay with in San Francisco, and stayed with them for a little while. Then I went back to the place in Oakland, and then after a while I thought, you know what, I don't know where I'm doing here or anything like that. And it's nice visiting. I don't know, what my skill sets are to be able to, afford my own place and what to do here. And so I got in touch with my family, who by that time had moved to Austin, Texas. They had left Puerto Rico 2 years before. And they said, okay, well, we'll send you a ticket and fly you down.
Great.
So I flew back to Austin, Texas. Bless you.
And how old are you at this point?
I was probably 22.
Okay. Yeah.
And that would make it 73. Yeah, I think so.
So when you talk about your family, who was it that was living in Austin at that time?
My father, my mother, my brother, who was married. George was married at that time. His first wife was named Mercedes.
Mercedes?
Mercedes, like Morelli. You call them Morelli, but it was Mercedes. And they were both at the University of Texas.
Yeah.
She was studying psychology, and he was doing an interdisciplinary major, basically taking whatever classes he wanted, interested in.
Yeah.
And so they were living on a separate place in Austin.
Yep.
And let's see, my younger sister was living there, and my sister, who was 1 year younger than me, I'll call my older sister, the younger of the two sisters, was in the Virgin Islands. She was just hanging out, living there.
Okay.
And so...
how did you feel about being back with your family?
Awful. I thought, wow, this is like, I had a big ambition of living home and not having anything to do with home for a while till I could like make my own way in the world.
Was it more about not getting along with your family or not liking your family, or more about your image of yourself at that point?
The two were kind of built into each other.
Okay.
So...
we don't have to talk about anything that you're uncomfortable with.
Okay.
If you don't want to. So.
Yeah, I mean, they were kind of built into each other. We had abrasive my father was a sergeant major in the Army at one point. Yeah. And so I bridled under that kind of discipline and wanted to have my own life.
Yeah, it must have been pretty strict.
Yeah, it was very strict, but I did also have an idea. Since after he retired, he had his own business, a locksmith business that I mentioned.
Right.
And his idea of family success was everybody working in the family business. And I was not encouraged in any different path towards an appreciable career path. So I was like... it was harder than I thought.
So it sounds like what you're saying is your dad's image of what everyone's profession should be contributed a lot to your feeling of aimlessness and being a lost soul.
Yeah, I would say it contributed a lot to it, and also didn't have ambitions or help for me beyond 12th grade.
Okay.
It was like, because, he graduated high school in, I don't know, 18, he was born in 18, so that would have been 38. He graduated in the middle of the Depression, like 1935 or something. So and the high school was plenty at that time, but in 1967 it wasn't. At least for anything I might want to do, it wasn't what I thought.
So it sounds like you were not close with your father.
Yes and no. I mean, I was closer than I realized, but not in ways that I could appreciate at the time. Because what I was more appreciative of is my need to find the space between us.
Yeah, fair enough.
So that's what I was up to. So when I went back in Texas at that time, I took it as a big defeat. Well, here you are. You landed on your butt here because your idea of having a viable something to do out there didn't work out. So I stayed there for a while, and I did like the prospects there. I worked as a house painter for a while, but didn't like that.
Well, were there any members of your family? You had many brothers and sisters, and your mother was there as well. Were there any members of your family?
I had a brother and a sister there.
Yeah, brother and a sister. Were there any members of your family that you were really close with?
No, not there.
Not there.
It was my brother I was very close with, was George.
Yeah.
But he was about his own life at that point.
Sure.
And Bob was about like mayhem.
What was Bob doing?
He was I don't know if he had graduated high school by that time. He may not have graduated high school. 4 years. He may have been a senior in high school at that point. And he was, my parents were just hoping that he gets out of high school without getting into big trouble. And he did. He did graduate, but he went no further in education than that. And then he got in trouble. He worked as a bartender. He sold drugs. He worked with bands there in Texas on, local bands, stuff like that. And got into trouble with drugs, dealing drugs. He was gotten out of jail a couple of times by my father. And and my sister was 10 years younger than I was. So if I was 22, she was 12. So we weren't close.
Okay, yeah, just too far away.
Yeah.
In age. Yeah. Interesting. So this is going great so far. I don't know if you're wondering, but this is spot on with what my goals are.
Okay.
I just want to check in. We're about half an hour in. Already.
You want to finish it up at another time?
Does that work for you? I'm happy to do that.
Yeah,
I can remember exactly where we left off.